I just spent the day helping around my Uncle Henry's farm, earning some much-needed cash while I'm waiting on another layoff. It was a long day out in the hot sun and I'm dead on my feet. But I don't think I'll be sleeping much tonight. The original plan was to grab a bite to eat and engage in my favorite pastime of melting into the couch with some low-rent horror movies. But I don't seem to be very hungry anymore. And I definitely don't feel like watching a horror movie. Maybe not for a while. Around 11 this morning, I was up in the loft of Henry's barn pitching down hay and drizzling sweat from every pore like a fountain. He was squinting up at me through the haze of his Players Unfiltered, jawing away as usual about life, the universe, and all things in between with his dry, ambling countryman's wit. He asked me what me and the missus would be getting up to this evening with a sly wink from the under of his brim of his gray, hip dude from the 40s style hat, turning the innocuous question into a sex joke. I grinned down at him, with sweat dripping from my eyebrows, and said, "You're an old goat, Henry. We're probably just gonna veg out on the couch and watch a movie. We're on a zombie kick these days. Lots of fake blood and bad acting. Good mindless fun." Henry waved a dismissive hand and said,
"Zombies? Hell, don't you watch no titty flicks? They got all kinds of porn on the internet these days, Live a little."
I barked some surprised laughter and shook my head. My uncle is almost 83. "Throw me up a smoke, would you?"
"Now don't start a fire in my hayloft, you darn idiot."
He grunted.
"Just climb on down here and take a break. Do I look like a shot put champion to you?"
Climbed down the ladder that's nailed in place against the loft and accepted a Pall Mall Unfiltered. It made my head swim with the first harsh and heavy drag. I sat down on the seat of the big riding mower and coughed until my face was red. Henry dragged his beer cooler over to the tractor and he plopped down on top of it with a wince and a sigh.
"Careful, man. You can't handle these ones. Your generation's kinda delicate, willowy."
"And you could pitch the fucking hay yourself." I finished for him. Henry laughed at that and gave me a beer out of his old cooler. He was quiet for a few minutes, just leaning back against the tractor tire and staring off into the barnyard, with his cigarette smoldering away between his fingers. He looked like he was deep in thought. I drank my beer and waited for him to say what was on his mind. Henry grunted.
"I saw some zombies once. Weren't like they were in the movies, but I guess you'd call them zombies."
His customary to hell with the world grin abruptly faded and died.
"Yeah, we came here from Romania. Did you know that? Yeah, it was back in the early 30s. We were supposed to board a train on the East Coast and make our way out to a community of Romanian folks out west. I was too young to remember what happened exactly, but there was a fuck-up. We didn't make it to our destination, not just us, but a bunch more Romanian and Hungarian families. And a few Germans, too. Probably almost 30 people in total. We got rerouted somehow because no one spoke English and we couldn't communicate with anyone."
Yeah, I know all about that, but what's this about fucking zombies? I've had many a beer-fueled discussion with Henry on various paranormal subjects, and he's rambled on about some pretty crazy stuff before. But this was on a whole new level. Henry's forehead wrinkled into a frown, and he suddenly looked older. Older than I've ever seen him. Old and tired, his roomy brown gaze was flat and completely humorless. Henry no longer resembled the cheerful, eccentric country character I'd known my whole life. He looked like a hardened man who had survived the Depression, a world war, and hardships I could never imagine.
"It's important to the story,"
he said. What he meant was shut up, so I did exactly that and waited for him to continue.
"We ended up being dumped off at a train station that was located near fuck all and nowhere. No money, couldn't speak the language, no place to go. We didn't even know where the hell we were. On top of all that, it was late in the fall, it was getting cold. We sheltered somewhere in them abandoned train cars that barely made it through the winter."
Holy shit. I whispered I had no idea. Henry looked at me in the eye. His gaze had weight.
Somehow, everybody survived that first winter. No one froze or starved. Remember, this was back in the dirty 30s. There weren't any social programs like there are nowadays, not for a bunch of dirt farmers from across the pond anyway. When spring came, it was decided that the able-bodied men and the older boys would leave and try to find work somewhere. Never heard again from a lot of them, but after a while, money started finding its way back to us. And we got by. Some German women from the Lutheran church heard about our situation, and they were coming back with food and clothes as often as they could, but we weren't thriving, but we got by.
He lit another smoke. He offered me the pack, but I didn't want it.
Problem was, we were stuck. Nowhere to go, no money to go nowhere with. Just foraging and surviving on what little came back to us. I was trapping rabbits in the woods, picking wild berries, stealing ears of feed corn in the middle of the night. Shit. Whatever we could do to eat, we did it. The cops left us alone because we didn't really bother no one or take anything of real value, but they sure didn't help us either. And then winter came again.
Henry lapsed into silence. I waited through a full minute of tense silence before I prodded. Henry, winter came and he snorted.
Let me tell you something. It's damn near impossible to keep a tin box heated with a makeshift barrel stove. And we weren't just cold, we were hungry. Snow was bad that year. Ladies from the church were having a hard time getting out to see us, and we could hardly ever make it into town to pick up the money the men were sending back. It was a desperate situation.
Henry stopped to drink his beer, and I saw that his hands were shaking.
There was a Hungarian family.
He croaked.
The man had left to find work with the rest of them, him and his brother. They left his wife, a grandpa, 4 kids. The youngest of them was maybe 4, 5. Just a little guy. One morning he goes out with his oldest brother to fetch some firewood. And only the older brother comes back. Said a wolf came running out of the woods and took his brother away. Said it snatched him up before he could even react.
I shifted uncomfortably in the worn and torn seat of the mower and said, Jesus Christ, that poor kid.
Nah.
Henry grimaced.
There was a problem, see. The kid didn't come running back after his brother just got dragged away by a fucking wolf like you'd think he would. Your little brother gets taken by a wolf? Hell, most kids would fucking come out screaming like their ass was on fire, their hair was catching. But he didn't. Nah, this kid just stayed right there and gathered up some firewood. He was gone for almost 5 hours. And there was blood on his coat.
Henry waited a few moments for the implications to sink in.
The kid's grandpa grabbed him and tore his coat off, ripped it right open at the seams in a rage, and suddenly I understood. We all started screaming at him, everyone standing in a circle in front of their boxcar, just yelling and screeching at the kid at the top of their lungs. His mother wailed, "Why would you do such a thing, you little monster?" She slapped the tooth right out of his mouth. Saw it go flying through the air. She gave him another zinger right off the top of the head, and wham! The kid ran off. His mother grabbed a good-sized branch from that pile of firewood he brought back and chased after him.
Weakly, I interjected. Hey, Henry, maybe this isn't. Henry ignored me and plowed on. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking out in the barnyard again.
He didn't get very far. She was a woman possessed, shrieking like a banshee and swinging that branch with everything she had. No one tried to stop her. We just stood there in the howling wind and we watched it happen. After it was over, some of the women buried him in the snow and they took his shoes off first, though. Still had some wear left in him. It would have been a waste to bury him.
I drenched my suddenly parched throat with a few large swallows of my beer and gasped. God, what did the mother do after he was dead?
And she went into her boxcar and laid down in her blankets.
Henry wheezed.
Didn't come out for 3 days.
I abruptly realized I would have rather been almost anywhere else than sitting there in Henry's barn, feeling slightly ill as this horrible tale fell like toxic rain from his lips. It somehow made it worse that it was coming from Henry, a good-hearted fellow and all-around decent human being, a man who I'd known my entire life, instantly worse. I asked, "What about the youngest brother?" And Henry's grimace deepened into a tragedy mask of deep lines and spiderweb wrinkles. He had himself another long swallow from his beer can.
Me and a few of the older boys followed their tracks out to the woods, not far from the tree line. 2 sets of tracks joined together. There were drops of blood in the snow. The trail ended in the weeds, and there was blood everywhere. Big splashes and frozen puddles of the stuff all over the place. Found a good-sized rock with a sharp edge lying on the ground. There was more blood on the rock. A lot of it. Strands of human hair. We made a fire pit nearby. Kicked some snow over it to bury the evidence, but it was a pretty half-assed attempt. He was just a kid after all.
I felt a shiver at that statement. Just a kid. Just a normal boy who'd slowly become a desperate and starving boy with another long, hopeless winter ahead of him. Did the older brother cry as he beat his defenseless younger sibling with a rock? Did he cry when he sank his teeth into the boy's burned and blackened flesh?
There were some scraps of burnt-up clothes in the ashes. I could smell the odor of roasted meat in the fire pit, just faint, but it was there. And God help me, my stomach was growling. Couldn't help it. None of us could. We turned away from the fire pit and followed another trail into the woods. He tried to hide the body underneath a pile of pine branches. I think he was hoping to come back to it later.
Oh, I made a sound of disgust in the back of my throat. Henry solemnly nodded in agreement.
Oh, yep, you bet. It was bad. We didn't want to leave him to the coyotes, so we made a sled out of branches and hauled the remains back to our camp. He got buried not far from his brother. And that was that. It was done. We all tried to forget what happened and we moved on. It might sound fucking horrible, but there wasn't any other way to make it any better. The deed was done and would never be undone. The rest of us had to get back to the business of survival.
I blinked up at Henry and breathed. Oh man, this is fucking heavy. Henry quavered.
Awful thing, especially for a kid my age, too young to do anything about it, too old to forget it. I was 9 years old that winter, and I was the one who saw him first.
Henry sipped at his beer. I could see that he was trying to get his thoughts in order. I patiently waited for him to continue.
Maybe a couple weeks after we put the 2 of them under the snow, I was having a pee before bed and standing just outside the boxcar with my willy shriveling in the frigid breeze. Just as I was finishing up, I realized that I could feel something staring at me. I could actually feel it, you know? I could feel the eyes on me.
Yeah, I know the feeling. My voice was thick. I didn't want to listen to even one more second of this story, but I didn't have any choice. Henry was going to let it all out, and it was far too late to stop him now.
I looked up and saw him at the rear of the car, standing just as still as a mannequin. His forehead was dented in, and one of his eyeballs was hanging from his socket. It was the Hungarian boy. His good eye was blazing a deep shade of red, and this... I don't know how to explain it. Made me think of hellfire. I could see that his bare feet weren't touching the snow.
I felt the beer can crumple as I involuntarily tightened my grip. Despite the heat, a sharp chill had raced up my spine.
I screamed and ran back inside with both my hands holding my pants up.
Henry grinned. There was no humor in that grin, none at all.
I had told everyone what I'd just seen, and the other kids all started crying. Your grandma grabbed me by the arm and demanded to know what I was telling the truth. Her eyes were so wide that they were popping out of her skull. She was scared, really scared, and her reaction scared the rest of us even worse. She called me a liar and a horse's ass, she yelled. What would happen if his poor mother heard you say all those horrible things? Has she not suffered enough, you lying little bastard?
Henry wiped the back of his hand across his mouth and let out a shaky breath.
I kept crying that it was true. When your grandma yelled, she started roaring liar at the top of her lungs, and she beat the tar out of me. She was scared. She was hungry. And I think she was probably losing hope too, just like the rest of us. She was tired of being strong. She was tired of being alone. So I guess I understand. I don't blame her for beating on me.
I just sat there and stared at him. Until that very moment, I never suspected the tiny, kindly old grandmother of my childhood memories would be capable of such a thing. My jaw was probably on the floor.
The next day, Ma and some of the other women went out to go collect firewood. Ma left me in charge, being the oldest. When they were gone, me and your dad snuck out to the oldest brother's grave. We knew what he'd become.
He was. I trailed off. I couldn't quite get the words out of my mouth.
Some people call them vampires.
Henry said. He dropped his empty beer can on the dirt floor and fetched himself another one.
Some people call them vampires. In the old country, we knew them as STRIGOI. And I suppose other people have names for them too, but it's the same thing. A corrupted spirit that feeds on the living. He was still hungry, that boy. Cold and hungry for our warmth. Ma knew it too, but she didn't want to believe it. I had a shovel and your dad was carrying his pocket knife. The cheap little thing with a blade maybe 3 inches long, but we had no idea what we were doing, and I was scared shitless.
Despite myself, I was on the edge of my seat. I asked for a cigarette. He lit it for me with his big, tarnished Zippo, and lit himself another too.
I dug through the snow all the way through the frozen ground, but he wasn't there. Snow hadn't been disturbed, but the body was gone. Mother of the dead boys was the first one to disappear. She stepped out one night to scoop a pail of snow for water, and she didn't come back. The track stopped about 10 feet from the door of their boxcar, and just one pair of footprints, nothing more. Next night, a little girl went out for a pee after dark, and she was never seen again. Once again, there was only one set of tracks in the snow. After that happened, I steeled myself for another beating. And I told your grandmother that the boy was no longer in his grave. She cried with her face in her hands, grabbed me by the shirt and hissed, "You must not go out after dark. Promise me you won't. Promise me." I gave her my word that I wouldn't. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of fingernails scratching at the walls of our boxcar. Your dad heard it too. We crept up to the ragged old blankets that hung over the door, quiet as a couple church mice. I pushed past them to take a peek. Just a crack. I found myself staring directly into that blazing red eye. It was right there on the other side of the blankets, waiting for me.
Henry shuddered in the oppressive heat. He wiped away a slick layer of sweat from his brow and regarded the lit end of his cigarette with a look of horror. His bony old knees were trembling inside his baggy green work pants. He dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his work boot.
"Red as hellfire,"
he murmured.
I froze like a statue. There were only a few layers of horse blankets between me and the thing outside. I could smell him. He smelled like rotten meat and burning sulfur. I could only see that one eye, but I knew he was smiling. I could feel that smile. Chewed right through the blankets and gnawed into my soul. Thing let out a high-pitched whining sound like a hungry animal begging for scraps. It whispered, "Let me in, Henry. I'm cold. I'm lost." My mind went blank for a second or two. I felt like I was falling into that eye, sinking down into burning oblivion. Your dad whispered, "What is it?" from behind me. I snapped out of it. I yanked the blankets closed and pushed them away. I said, "There's nothing out there. There's nothing." We crawled back into our miserable little beds, and after I was sure he was asleep, I started crying as quietly as I could. I was shaking like a leaf. God help me, I wanted to let that thing in. Hell yeah, just throw back those old horse blankets and welcome that awful thing inside with open arms. I was probably seconds away from doing just that, and if your dad hadn't snapped me out of it, I reckon we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. None of us would be here.
I sat up in my seat and interjected. "Oh, okay, just a second here, Henry. Where the hell was Grandpa while this was going on? Did he know? Couldn't you send him a telegram or something, write him a letter? Henry snorted at the floor. He shook his head.
Nobody really knows for sure what happened to your grandpa. He left us and we never saw him again. He didn't send one thin dime back to his family, not once. As far as I know, he was either in jail or he was dead. It's the only conclusion that makes any sense to me.
I raised an eyebrow and shook my head. I could see in his face that this was a lie. Never saw him again? Of course he came back at some point. How else would I have known the man during my childhood? Trying to keep my tone neutral, I said, well, obviously you all ended up being reunited at some point, right? I know this for a fact. I spent a lot of summers working on his farm. He was definitely alive and well. Henry gave me a look that I'd never seen from him before. A cynical and calculating assessment. After a moment or two, he chuckled.
Oh, you know that for a fact, do you? No, you never met your biological grandfather. The man you called Grandpa was actually your grandma's second husband. My stepfather, I guess. Although I was already long gone by then. They married in the late 50s.
Once again, my jaw was on the floor. I sputtered. What? Why didn't I know about this? Do any of my cousins know? Henry cocked his head and drawled.
Nah, I doubt it. Among us kids, we never talked about those days. No point dredging up all those awful memories.
I trailed off, trying to choose my words carefully. I mean, this story is pretty far out there, Henry, but I don't feel like you're pulling my leg either. I just don't know.
Well, maybe you don't.
Henry murmured.
But I do. Because the German family that lived in the train next door were gone the next morning. All of them. The tarp they were using for a door was hanging wide open, and their barrel stove was cold. No signs of a struggle, nothing missing. They were gone. 6 kids and 4 women. Left everything behind and just vanished.
Henry fumbled in his pack for another cigarette. I held out my hand and he passed me one over. I squinted through the smoke and shook my head at him. So you guys packed up and immediately got out of there, right? I mean, I would have been out of there so fast. There'd be a trail of smoke behind me. Just get up and go.
Go where?
Henry countered. And I threw my hands in the air. Go anywhere, man. Jesus Christ. Who gives a shit where? There were fucking vampires scratching at the walls? It was high time to put on your boogie shoes and go.
I ain't got no boogie shoes.
Henry wheezed.
I was wearing the Hungarian boy's shoes, the shoes they pulled off his feet before they buried him in the snowdrift. They were just about worn out, my socks were full of holes, and once again, go fucking where? It was the Great Depression, we were in a foreign land. You think there was somewhere we can go? Put your head out of your ass.
I looked down at my beer can to avoid making eye contact. I didn't know this version of Henry. I never even suspected that he existed. Meekly I answered, "No, I guess not."
I guess not,
he repeated.
It's easy to say what you would have done, but you weren't actually there, isn't it? There are only 2 options. We could stay there and pray to God that we be spared, or we could try to reach the nearest village and freeze to death. The snow was deep. It would take a better part of a day for a healthy adult to make that journey, and almost 3/4 of the group were kids. Most of us weren't even 10 years old. And even if we made it there, there'd be nowhere for us to stay. The people in the village already made it known they wanted nothing to do with us. We haven't heard from those women from the Lutheran church in almost 2 months. We were on our own. You could taste the panic in the air. They decided that we'd cram everyone in just 3 of the boxcars when the sun set so we could all keep an eye on each other. It was cramped as a bitch in there, but at least it was warmer than usual. No one said a word all night. Even the youngest kids were quiet as church mice. I was scared, but I thought we would probably be safe as long as nobody looked outside. Even so, nobody really got any sleep. We heard voices in the wind. Sometimes there'd be a bang against the side of the car, and my heart would start pounding. Right around 2 a.m, we all heard a scream, just the one word, "No," and then silent. Morning was a long time coming. When the sun finally came peeking over the horizon, we found the 2 boxcars standing wide open. Everyone inside of them was gone.
I felt a shiver race up my spine. Henry got off of the cooler with a loud pop in his knees, and he offered me another beer. I popped it open and drank deeply. Despite the oppressive heat shimmering in the air outside the barn door, I felt cold all over.
You'd think that no one would be able to sleep the next night, but everyone was sawing logs by midnight. We'd all been awake for at least 36 hours. I fell into this incredibly vivid dream that spring had arrived. In the dream, I pulled back the horse blankets, saw golden sunlight shining down on a green meadow. The snow was gone, and it was warm. I could hear the birds singing. The Hungarian boy's mother was out there sitting in a rocking chair, rocking away and humming to herself in the sunshine. Both of her boys were sitting in her lap, one on each leg, and they looked clean, happy, well-fed. The butterflies were dancing in the air above their heads, and it was picture perfect, like a scene right out of a magazine. I could see others roaming around in the background, calling out to each other, laughing in the warmth of the sun. No one was hungry. No one was afraid. Their suffering was over. The dead boy's mother saw that I was just watching them, and she called out, "Come join us, child. Winter is over. You look hungry. Here, come have a nice bowl of goulash." She walked up to the door and held out a big steaming bowl of meat and gravy, and oh my Christ, did it ever smell good. I wanted it so bad, but I wanted to be outside even more, feel the warmth on my face. But even in the dream, I knew something was wrong. Her eyes weren't right. They were glowing that deep, ugly red, that hellfire red. She stood in front of our door with that steaming bowl of stew cradled in her hands, smiling up at me in the sunlight. And I realized that it smelled exactly like that burned body we found in the woods.
Henry grinned his crooked, humorless grin at the floor between his feet.
She almost got me. I almost reached for that bowl. It took everything I had to step away from the door and say, "No, go away, you can't come in." The next instant, someone was screaming in the dark, and I was fighting to throw off my blankets. My heart was racing a mile a minute. It was your grandma. She was screaming at the old Hungarian man, the grandfather of the boys that we buried out there in the snow. He was standing in front of the door with his blankets pulled aside, and I could see that the moonlight was hitting his face, but he was still asleep. Ma grabbed his arm and he yelled, "Let me go, I want to feel the sun." I barely seen what happened next. It was just a blur. The old boy hopped outside in nothing but his long johns, and his arms spread out like he was about to give someone a big hug. And then he was gone. He was yanked right off his feet in the blink of an eye. Ma screamed again and pulled the blanket shut, but I caught a glimpse of the outside before she did, and I saw them. The people who went missing. I saw their eyes glowing in the dark.
Henry went silent again. I finished my beer and waited for him to collect himself. When he was able to continue, he said,
"Trauma is a hell of a thing. I fell right back to sleep after the old man was taken by the monsters outside. Out like a light. I think I probably fainted. I thought it was... and then I heard voices outside. They were calling for us to come out. I thought it was them at first, the things with the red eyes, but it was the German women from the church. They'd stolen a sleigh from the stable in town, a great big sleigh with a team of horses. They'd been trying to come out to see us for weeks, but no one would help them, so they finally took matters in their own hands and helped themselves to the sleigh. They said it was what Jesus would do."
Henry chuckled to himself and took a long swallow from his beer can.
And your grandma flung herself at their feet. She begged them to take us back into town. They asked us where the rest of us were, but Ma just shook her head and kept saying, "Take us with you, please. You must take us away from here." In the end, they simply couldn't say no. We found ourselves staying in the basement of a Lutheran church. Townsfolk weren't too happy about it, but the German women shamed them with Bible quotes until they shut the hell up and left us alone.
What did Grandma tell them about the people that went missing? She would have had to tell them something.
The truth.
Henry grunted.
Yeah, they were church-going folk in a simpler time. They believed in the forces of good and evil. When the spring thaw came, they took Ma out to the junked-out boxcars with a few bags of salt. I went out there with them. We salted the earth and gave the little Hungarian boy a proper burial. I was the one who dug the hole. We planted an apple tree to mark his grave, and we never came back.
Henry looked at his watch and sighed.
And that's pretty much it, kiddo. That's the story. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm getting hungry. Let's go to the house and get some lunch.
Henry's story had left me feeling like a wrung out washcloth. It was a fantastic and dreadful tale, but there was no doubt in my mind that he was telling the truth. Except for one crucial detail. I cleared my throat and asked him, What really happened to Grandpa, Henry? I think you know the answer. Henry grimaced and scrubbed his hands over his eyes. He looked exhausted, but he also looked relieved. Secrets are heavy baggage. It is always a relief to be free of their burden.
He crossed the border and left us for dead. Got married to some floozy who owned a brothel and had a bunch of kids with her. Got divorced. Got hitched to another one. Ran a bootlegging business from what I can gather. Got rich off it too. Lived in a mansion with his third wife until he died in the early 80s. Went peacefully in his own bed. I hope hell is hot enough for that man, because he was never a fan of the cold very much.
With that, story time was officially over, and we went up to the house for sandwiches and soup. Aunt Eustace prattled on about family gossip as we ate, and by the time we finished, I almost felt normal again. But that was before the sun set over the horizon. Things are different in the dark. The house creaks, shadows crawl across the walls, and all semblance of rationality goes right out the window. It's almost 1 a.m. and I'm tired as hell, but I doubt very much that I'll get any sleep tonight. If I close my eyes, I'll see a little boy with a dead complexion standing in the snow. A little boy with a dent in his skull and a mad glow of crimson flames dancing in his remaining eye. He'll bare his teeth in a feral smile, and that will be that. I'll just end up coming back downstairs to watch infomercials with all the lights on, waiting for the sun to rise. Things are different in the dark. If you don't believe me, just ask Uncle Henry. He knows all about it.